Hello and welcome to another episode of Doug Formative. On today's episode, I'm going to show you how to work with text in Inkscape. So first thing we're going to do is, you can set up your canvas any way that you want to. If you want to get rid of this page here in the middle, you can go up here to File, Document Properties, and down here where it says Border, you can uncheck the box that says Show Page Border. And that way you're working with a clean canvas, but it's entirely up to you if you want to leave that paper there or not. So let's go ahead and go over here to our Create and Edit Text Objects tool. We'll just call it the text tool for short. So you click on that, and then you can click anywhere on the canvas and start typing anything. So let's just type the word text. And you notice it's pretty small to start out with. Now if you notice up here, you have a bunch of text options, and depending on what tool you have selected over here, you're gonna get different options up here on the top of the menu here. So we could go up here and we can change the font that we want. We can change the style of the font if you want normal. Not all fonts have different options. Some of them are just normal. Others have bold or italic. It just depends on the font and where you got the font from. And then we have our font size, which is pretty universal. We can go up here and enlarge this guy by adjusting the font size. Or the other way to make the text bigger so we can see exactly what it is that we're doing, we can grab our selector tool by either clicking on this button here or hitting the letter S on the keyboard. And you'll know you have your selector tool because you'll see an arrow. Now in order to enlarge the text, we can hold Control and click on any of these arrows here and click and just drag it out. And you notice no matter how much we drag this text out, it's still perfectly smooth. And that is one of the beautiful things about working in Inkscape or any kind of like a vector-based program, is no matter how far you zoom in, you're getting a really crisp, high quality image. And so let's go ahead and let's do some adjusting on this text. So say for instance you kind of like this font, but you want to change it up a little bit. Well, first of all, in order to change up this text, you need to make this a path, because as it stands now, it's just a text and it's uneditable. So with the text selected, let's go up here, click on Path, and go to Object to Path. And what that does, which you can't really tell right now, is it allows you to edit each of these letters individually. And how you can do that is, first you can go to Object, and then you can go to Ungroup, and you notice each of these letters have a box around it. And that means that you can edit each of these letters individually. Like if I wanted to move this T over somewhere else, okay, yeah, we can do all that. We can adjust these as individual objects. But for the sake of this tutorial, let's go ahead and leave those letters together, and I'm just going to undo what I did by moving those letters around by holding Control and hitting the letter Z repeatedly until all those letters are back to where they were originally. Now if you're working on a desktop and you have a mouse that has the scroll wheel on it, you can click in on the scroll wheel and you can drag the canvas around so we can recenter this text and then work with it. Alright, so another way that we can adjust each of these letters is by going to our Edit Paths by Nodes tool. Now you click on that, and you can't really tell immediately, but if you click on any of these letters, you'll see all these little nodes here. And any of these nodes, you can literally click and drag them out and adjust them however you would like. Now obviously that looks really bad, so you wouldn't want to do it that way, but let me go ahead and undo that. But for instance, maybe you don't like the way this portion of the E doesn't connect. Let's go ahead and make it connect by clicking over here and dragging over these 3 nodes. And that allows you to edit these 3 nodes as one solid unit. Now if you click on any one of these, hold Control on the keyboard, and then drag to the left, it lets you connect that E. So it's one solid object. There's no gap or anything here in this opening. Now if we go back to our selector tool by clicking on the arrow or hitting S on the keyboard, you can see that change that we made here. You know, you may or may not like that, but then, you know, that's just one option that you have. You know, the other thing, maybe you don't like this X to be rounded like that. Maybe you want it to be more squared off. So let's see what we can do. If we click on this X, let's go to our Edit Paths by Nodes tool. And one of the first things that we can do is we can eliminate these 2 nodes, which will connect this node and that node separately. So if you click and highlight these 2 nodes and hit delete on your keyboard, that gets rid of those 2 nodes, even though it keeps that curve. What you can do is you can click on this little handle here and you can straighten that out. Same thing with this one right here. You know, and that gives you more of like a straight line to that corner. You could do the same thing with these 2 guys. Select them and delete them. Click on that handle, drag it out. Same thing with that one. And you could do that for all of these sections to give you more of a angular looking X. That's just another option. Okay, so let's go ahead and undo that. Maybe you don't want to adjust the shape of each letter, but maybe you want to move them closer together. So how we can do that is we can go to our selector tool by hitting the letter S on our keyboard or clicking this guy up here. And let's start from the right side over here. We'll select this letter and hold Control and then click and drag this over so it's, yeah, right about there is good. Now the reason we want to hold Control is because it will keep whatever object you're moving on the same line. So if you're moving it horizontally or if you're moving it vertically, it will keep it on that same line so you can keep all the objects aligned the way that you want them to. Okay, now that's as close as I want to move that letter T here. So now let's go ahead and grab this X and we're going to move both of these letters over to the left. So let's hold Shift, click on the letter X. So now both of these letters are selected. We're going to hold Control again, click, and drag this over until we get about there. And that's, I like that right there. Do the same thing that we did before. Hold Shift, click on the letter E. Now hold Control, click, and drag that over. And that is pretty good right there. So the way that fonts are typically designed, they don't really give you the option to put the letters very close together. So depending on the shape or the style of the letter, sometimes you end up with larger gaps than you really want to see, and it's not visually appealing. So even though the text itself looks cool, maybe it's not aesthetically pleasing, you know, as much as you would want it to be. So you do have to make some adjustments, and you know, that's why I like having that option, so you can bring these letters closer together. Now, once you've adjusted the spacing of the lettering, maybe you want to do some cool like color effects. Now, if you want that color effect to apply to all of these letters, you're going to have to group these together, but not group them together. You want to make this a union. So Inkscape thinks that this is one solid object, and that way any color or gradient or anything like that that you apply is going to affect all of these letters. So let's go ahead and click up here and drag over the entire text. And we're going to go up here to Path and hit Union. And now anything that we do is going to affect all these letters like it's one object. So if I go down here to this color palette, I can click on any of these colors and it will change the color of all the letters because it thinks it's one object. Alright, so with this red color selected, alright, maybe you want to do like a red gradient where the red fades into black or something. How we can do that is with this text selected, we can go over here to our menu options, and if you don't see fill and stroke, you can go up here and click on this little box that looks like a square with a paintbrush in it. Click on that and then you'll get your fill and stroke options. Now with this text selected, under the fill tab, you notice you have 3 tabs here. With the fill tab chosen, you can click on this box right here, which is linear gradient. So click on that, and it usually defaults to a solid color on the left and then 0 opacity color on the right hand side. So it just looks like it's fading into nothing. Now in order to adjust that, you can either hit the letter G on your keyboard, which gives you your gradient tool, or you can click on this little guy over here. You know, that's your gradient tool right there. Now if you want to fade, you know, maybe you want to have the black on the bottom and then the red at the top. You can see that this color right here is your red, and when you click on that little box, you see what color is selected over here. And then if you click on this guy here, you see this little 0 opacity thing. Anytime you see that little checkerboard pattern, that means that the opacity is dropped down. Now what we want to do with this is click and drag this down to about the middle of the text. And then we're going to click this other guy, and if you hold Control before you drag this up, you can get a perfectly vertical line. So now the red portion of the gradient is at the top, and then our lowered opacity gradient is at the bottom. Now the first step that we want to do is we want to up the opacity to 100% on this bottom portion. Now we do that by clicking on this little dot here, and then see how the opacity down here is 0? You're just going to click anywhere in that little bracket and drag it over to the right until it's 100%. And now with that still selected, we could either come here and drag this to the left, or you can click on the black color over here in the palette, you know, but I kind of like it to where it's not completely black, it's just like a dark shade of red. You know, I think that in itself makes this huge difference in the style of this text here. You know, and that's not all you can do. You know, if you hit S on the keyboard, or sometimes S doesn't work. If you have something selected, if you hit S on the keyboard, it doesn't always give you your selector tool, so you don't always have a choice, and you can select the tool by clicking on that arrow there. And now we can, you know, click off of the text so you can see what it looks like without the selection being around it. The other thing that we could do, if you wanted to, you can add a border around the outside of each letter, and you can do that by selecting, you know, you can just click any letter here, and if you wanted to add an outline, maybe you want a black outline on this text, you can do that by holding Shift and clicking on black down here. And if for some reason you don't see any outline, or maybe it's just so small that you don't even notice it, and you can tell by holding control and scrolling up, there is an actual black outline on the letters, but it's just so minimal that it's hard to tell when you have it zoomed out. Now, how you can increase the width of that outline is by going over here to stroke style, and it's set to millimeters. Now, it's entirely up to you, if you want to change if it's millimeters or pixels or centimeters, whatever you're more comfortable with. I like working with pixels, and it's set to 1 pixel. If you change it to pixels, you can see it's pretty low number. So let's try 10 and see what that looks like. So now it's more noticeable. You can see that black outline around each letter, but maybe you want something more dramatic. Maybe you want double that. So let's change it to 20 and see how that looks. You can keep increasing it until you get the desired result. And I kind of like the way this one looks with the 30. I think that's a pretty cool effect with a text. And when you do a gradient, you're not just limited to the inside color of the text here. You could add a gradient to the outline as well. So if you go over here and you go to your stroke paint with this selected, you can add a gradient to your outline by selecting the stroke paint tab, selecting linear gradient, and maybe you want to have like where it looks like a white highlight in the middle of the outline. So how we can do that, instead of just having it go from one color to another, you can add another point to the gradient that will allow you to have one color at the top, one color at the bottom, and a separate color in the middle of this outline. Now what we want to do is, let's grab our gradient tool by hitting G on the keyboard, and if you notice, we have a separate gradient tool here, and this gradient represents the gradient for the outline, and this other gradient, the vertical one, is the one that we created for the inside color of the text. So what we want to do is we want to make this line vertical also. So let's go ahead and click and drag this one, put it down here at the bottom, and just make sure you keep it separate from this guy right here. Click on this other one and then hold Control, so when you drag it over here you can get that vertical line just like we did with the other gradient. Now what we want to do is hover over this line, and around the midway point, or maybe a little bit lower, if you double click on it, it gives you another gradient point that lets you add a separate color. So let's add a white to the middle here. So we have white here, down here we have black, and any point that we click on, you can see what color it is by looking down here underneath this underneath the palette. And then up here we have that no opacity color, but I want to change that to black. So we have black at the bottom, fading to white, and then fading back into black. So with that dot selected, let's click on black again, and then if you look over here, just make sure that the opacity is all the way up, and that's 255. So like I said before, you got black down here at the bottom, fading to white, and fading to black now. And you can make whatever adjustments you want. If you don't like that, you can click in the middle dot and you can drag that up more. You can drag the top dot here if you don't want such a dark black there. Maybe you want more like a darker gray. You could do the same thing with this one. So it's more of a subtle gradient. You've got that as an option. And I think that's that looks pretty cool. That's a a really cool effect. Now, maybe you want to distort the text a little bit more by making it look like it's a perspective. Maybe you want it to look like this T is really big and then it's fading down towards the end of the text. Now, how we can do that is select the text, and we have an effect where you go to path, and then you go to path effects. So you click on path effects, and that gives you this other menu over here. And in order to create a path effect, you click on this plus button here, and you got a bunch of different options that you can choose from. I'm not going to go into all of these right now, but the one that we want to focus on is perspective/envelope. So we're going to click on that, click on add, and what that does is if you go over here and click on your edit paths by nodes tool, it gives you these 4 corners along the outside of the selection here. And now what we could do is if we hold control on the keyboard, click on this top corner, we can drag it straight up. We can go down here to this bottom one, click and drag it straight down, and then hit S on the keyboard and click off of it, and as you can see, it looks like we have the text that is closer to us over here on the left side and further away over here on the right. So that's another option. Now, if we wanted to make this text look like it's 3-dimensional, we could add some depth to it by drawing some lines off to the side. But I'm not going to do that in this tutorial. I could save that for like a 3D effect video. I just wanted to give you an idea of some options that you have working with text. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys in my next video. Take care.